So we have a serious logjam right now in the lightweight division. If you watch the post show right after Ilia Topuria's win on Saturday over Charles Oliveira, there was quite a bit of debate going around, right? Most of the guys were pandering to Paddy Pimblett being next, since as you know, he got dragged into the octagon by Ilia afterwards. Even though he was talking about Arman in there when he mentioned the back injury, that was a dig at Arman, and Joe Rogan had to be like, "Oh, you're talking about Paddy Pimblett?" So, a lot of them are pandering for Paddy right now. A couple of them threw Arman's name in there. Anthony Smith threw Justin Gaethje's name in there. I guess the old dogs got to stick together there. So, right now we're looking at three potential next opponents for Ilia. Paddy Pimblett, Arman Tsarukyan, um, and Justin Gaethje, right? Now, I do think that they probably are going to do a title eliminator. Let Ilia chill for a little bit. He's just achieved greatness. Let him chill. Have him come back later on, November, December, something like that, and let these guys get it sorted out, right? So far, Paddy's the most intelligent about it because Arman, apparently it's come out now that he's missed weight. He missed weight for his title fight with Islam Makhachev back in January and has been sitting here for like 6-7 months now doing absolutely nothing. Won't take any fights, turn down the Gamrot fight, which is a true competitor. I don't see why you wouldn't want to get that back. Justin Gaethje, I don't know what that guy, like, I always knew he was a bit dumb and not the smartest human on the planet, but threatening retirement if they don't give you a title shot is literally the dumbest thing you can do, right? The dumbest thing you can do ever. So, now Dana's like, well, you know what I say about retirement. If you're talking about it, maybe you should do it. So, I don't know. What's going to end up happening is somebody's going to get cast out. They're going to get thrown out to the wind. They're done. Their careers, they're cooked, as my son would say, right? I'm pretty sure they're gonna make a title eliminator. I don't think Paddy just gets it by beating Michael Chandler. I understand that's a big money fight, but Jesus, we got to do the right thing here. So I'm gonna go through these next three potential opponents for Ilia Topuria. I'm gonna rank some of their strengths, some of their weaknesses, and ultimately how much of a test they would be for Ilia. So starting here, I put Paddy as the easiest test for Ilia. He's the easiest test for Ilia. Look, man, his pros, he does have really good submission grappling. He's pretty composed under pressure. You saw Chandler, was getting some takedowns on him last fight, had his back a few times, and he stays calm and composed under pressure. And he's unpredictable, which makes him kind of dangerous, right? Like, he was catching Chandler. I believe that's how he dropped him, right? Then he landed knee or something like that. So he is unpredictable. Decent gas tank. Not the greatest gas tank, but unpredictable, composed under pressure, good grappling, right? Cons, now these are the ones that greatly diminish his test for Ilia, for a guy like Ilia. He strikes with his chin up in the air, and he's been rocked multiple times because of this by total cans who I don't even think are in the UFC anymore. You're talking about like Luigi Vendramini. I can't remember who his debut was. These guys aren't even in the UFC, I'm pretty sure, anymore. And these guys were able to stun him on the feet and almost get him out of there, right? I know he has this whole thing, Scousers don't knock out, but listen, in this fight, Scouser's probably going to get knocked out. Level of competition, it's just not there, right? Michael Chandler, one good win in the UFC. Bobby Green, 50-50 journeyman fighter. Tony Ferguson, Tony Ferguson, right? So the matchup for Ilia, it's light work. It's easy. It's a cakewalk. No disrespect to Paddy, but most likely Paddy's going to get finished inside the first round because he strikes with his chin up in the air. He's very hittable, and he just doesn't really seem to have much of a game plan, right? He just kind of goes in there and goes batshit crazy. He does have skills. Look, he's a good fighter, but you gotta have a good, solid game plan for a guy like Ilia. This whole going in there, striking with your chin up in the air shit, it's going to get him put away quickly. All right. Now, Justin Gaethje. I put him at the second hardest test for Ilia. Pros, really good calf kicks can damage that leg, which, you know, that could be interesting with a guy like Ilia. If he can damage up that leg, he could maybe slow him down and get to him, you know, easier and potentially like diminish a lot of that power Ilia has by damaging that leg and leaving him hopping on that lead leg. Because I know Ilia does kind of plant because he throws so hard. So that leg is there for the taking. So that could be interesting. I haven't seen him really punish with calf kicks in a while though. But if he can go back to that and find that again, that could work really, really good in his favor, right? Decent power, not the greatest power, but he does have power, right? He can put guys down. He can put them away. Landed that beautiful head kick on Dustin Poirier, so he does have a high kick as well. Lots of championship experience, right? You're talking guys like Khabib Nurmagomedov. You're talking Charles Oliveira. He's fought for the interim. He's fought Dustin Poirier twice. You know, he's fought Max Holloway. So tons of high-level comp. So there probably won't be anything he hasn't seen with a guy like Ilia outside of like somebody with that much power, right? Now, the cons of Justin Gaethje, he doesn't seem to be able to adjust when things aren't going his way. You look at that Holloway fight, got his nose smashed at the end of the first round, and he just never really got going in that fight, right? He never really changed the game plan. He just kept marauding forward, kept getting hit, kept getting pieced up until he got flatlined at the end of the round. Which brings me to my next point. He got flatlined by Max Holloway, a guy who is not known to ever flatline people. A guy who doesn't have half the power Ilia Topuria has. That guy was able to put him away, face first on the canvas, right? Another thing, much slower than Ilia, much more plotty and slow. You know, Ilia has the ability to get in with like 3, 4, 5 piece combo before Justin gets off for like 2. Last but not least, the wrestling. This guy is is it a D2 or a D1 All-American? Has solid wrestling. You saw him use it earlier in his career, but he just doesn't use it anymore. And you know he's not going to use it for a guy like Ilia, you know, because he's going to go into that fight and he's going to say things like, "Oh, this is going to be a car crash for the ages." No, it's going to be one-way traffic in that. He's going to choose to stand with Ilia, and that's ultimately going to cost him, right? Now, in terms of the matchup for Ilia, again, I think this is an easy one for Ilia. I do think Justin's durable enough that he can survive that first round, unlike Charles, because Charles has been dropped a lot. Justin hasn't been dropped as much as Charles lately. He was earlier in his career, but going into this, I think he can survive some of that damage first round, but I think it's going to catch up to him in the second round. He's not as durable as he used to be. We saw that in the Holloway fight. You know, this guy can't just walk through punches anymore and out-tough guys like he used to, right? I know he's a lot more technical now and a lot more intelligent in there, but again, like choosing not to use the wrestling against a guy like Ilia, it's just, you know, that makes it easy work for Ilia, right? Okay, now, once this thing changes over, the toughest test out of the 3 men for Ilia is obviously Arman Tsarukyan. If you've been paying attention to the sport, you know Arman is the hardest test out of all 3 gentlemen for Ilia, right? He's got world-class grappling, damaging ground and pound. Like, he busts guys up. Like, you saw, he was busting Charles up on the ground, which is crazy to me why people think that Charles won that fight. Just because he locked up a submission at the end. Like, look, I gave Charles the first round. He had that submission in for a while, even though Ilia did reverse position and beat the shit out of him for the last, like, minute and a half of that round. You don't get points for putting a submission on at the end of the 3rd round. That does not give you the round after you were getting your ass kicked all round. So he does have good damaging top game ground and pound. I remember the fight with Joel Alvarez where he sliced him open early. I mean, Joel was a fountain of blood, so bad that the ref had to stop it. Joel Alvarez, solid prospect on the come up, right? So he's really good with those elbows on the ground. You're not submitting him. If Charles isn't doing it, look, you're probably not going to submit this man, right? He's really good in 3-rounders, right? Arman can really put a pace on guys with the wrestling and the striking, mixing it up in those first 3 rounds. Now the cons, he has been out over a year, and I just want to preface this: like if we just matched each one of these guys up with Ilia today, this is where we would be at. He has been out since UFC 300 back in April of 2024, right? One thing you'll notice about Arman, he tends to slow once you get into the championship rounds. Look, I don't think it's super detrimental. I don't think he just completely gasses out like a Luke Rockhold, Paulo Costa, where those guys were just putting their hands on their legs and breathing all heavy. It's not like super detrimental, but against a guy like Ilia, like that makes him easier to. It's easier for him to find your chin when you do slow down because the defense starts to fail a little bit. The hands start to come down a little bit. You start to really overextend on your shots, right? If you look at that Gamrot fight, the main reason Tsarukyan lost that fight, you look at that like 5th round, he started to slow down. It was easier for Gamrot to win those wrestling exchanges against him. Because early it was back and forth, nonstop scrambles. There wasn't really, anybody who was starting to pull away until those 4th and 5th rounds, where Gamrot started to work that double, and Arman wasn't able to scramble out as well because he was getting tired. So that's a big one for Arman, right? In terms of a test for Ilia, I think this is a medium one, right? It's a much harder test than Gaethje and Pimblett. And he most likely will give Ilia problems early with that wrestling when he's still fresh, before he's tired, right? The problem is, outside of like the Dariush fight, Arman doesn't really finish people, right? He's more of a decision kind of guy. Now, he does do a lot of damage in his fights with his ground and pound. He busts guys up. He slices them open. He lands a lot of significant strikes on the ground. But if he can't get Ilia out those first 3 rounds by like a TKO, I don't think he's going to submit Ilia. I mean, he's not really known for submissions. If he can't get Ilia out of there the first 3 rounds, that risk goes up highly of him being finished. If he doesn't get finished in the first 3 rounds by Ilia, it's so hard to avoid the speed, the setups, the footwork of Ilia. I do think he'll give him problems with takedowns early, but most likely in a fight like that, I could see Ilia probably getting like a 3rd round TKO over him. Because he is going to slow. He's going to have an insane pace. He's going to have to really pressure Ilia, get him against the cage, work his takedowns early. And, if he doesn't finish that fight, I see Ilia finishing him. So, as a hardcore, I would say the Tsarukyan fight is the most intriguing for me just because of the level of wrestling he has. Right? The other guys are, lambs to the slaughter, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, so far this is what we're looking at. Potential next 3 opponents for Ilia. Definitely, not as big money fights as he's had. I don't think they're as challenging as like a Volkanovski, right? I don't think he's as challenging as a Volkanovski. He does have the size, he does have the strength, but name value really isn't there. I think what ends up happening, I don't know. I think Gaethje might end up getting tossed out, right? I do think there's a good market for a fight with Tsarukyan and Pimblett because, they've kind of been talking shit back and forth. They don't like each other. Arman's a violent dude. Arman, be smacking fans and things like that, So I think there's definitely a market for that fight. I definitely think it's a good bad blood beef between him and Pimblett, and I honestly see that being the next fight for the UFC. I don't know what Justin's thinking talking about retirement. I think he's probably going to get cast out to the wind. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I don't know. I would just like to see Tsarukyan, Pimblett. Look, Arman probably crushes him because Pimblett doesn't really have the greatest cardio either. You're not going to be scrambling out of those wrestling exchanges like you were with a Chandler. So I most likely think Arman will be Ilia's next fight. And yeah, like I said, I see him giving Arman problems earlier. in that fight, but ultimately I see Ilia catching him like round 3, maybe even around 4. I think guys will be surprised by Ilia's cardio, right? Like people again, like I can't stress this enough. People forget what he did to Josh Emmett for 25 minutes. I mean, I don't even know how many strikes he threw. He was piecing Josh Emmett up the entire fight. Even landed some takedowns. Like that's the thing. Like these takedowns aren't going to be easy for Arman either with a guy like Ilia. Ilia has underrated grappling and underrated cardio. Like, I get he's knocking people dead, so that's naturally what we're going to gravitate towards, right? With his style. But, you know, the wrestling exchange is not going to be easy for Arman either there. But I have to give that to Arman. I do think Arman is a better grappler. I do think he will win the wrestling exchanges early against an Ilia Topuria. I do think he maybe takes a round or 2 off Ilia early. But, you know, I just can't. I can't deny Ilia's ability to find a shot. You know, you have to think, okay, well, you know, Ilia might drop a round or 2, and then he's going to end up coming back and finding that shot, getting the victory. So, next 3 opponents, that's what we're ranking. Yeah, I do think I'm going to do a Pantoja versus Mighty Mouse, kind of a resume breakdown to really see how that GOAT conversation stacks up. Because honestly, I think Pantoja's getting close, man. I think he's getting close. And that whole thing of him having to work his way up to the belt before he got it, as opposed to DJ, he kind of got it in his 3rd fight at flyweight after he avenged the draw with Ian McCall. I mean, that speaks volumes. And then the name value you look at, that's what I think the next video is going to be about. So until next time, peace.